Hello, welcome back to School Farm. It's February the 1st and it's a reasonably nice day. Apologies if there is wind noise, but we're going to get on with it. So we've got our 15 trees that we planted last year. I'll just remind you all, if you need reminding, of the 3 varieties that we've got. We've got Ashmead's Kernel, Kidd's Orange Red and Adam's Pearmain. So today we're going to be looking at the growth since last year, how we've mulched them, which we did a few weeks ago, and talk about what to do now, if anything, in terms of the pruning of the young trees. So this one here is Adam's Pearmain. As you can see, it's a bit sort of twiggy and it's got a lot of low growth. These were the ones that had a lot of low growth when they were when we planted them, and we cut them back. You can see hopefully that we cut them back to 2 or 3 buds last year, and they've kind of grown on in a rather twiggy, messy fashion, but we've got some growth at the top, which is good. So what I'm going to do is to take these lower ones off completely, and then with these middle ones I'm going to cut them back to our 2 or 3 buds as we did last year to the lower ones, and then for some of the trees I'm going to take the tops off because they've grown high enough for us to want them to branch. So I'm going to start with these lower ones, neatly taking them off at the junction, leaving just a tiny little bit of the ring there. It's always a question of how far up you should go with this, because there's quite a lot of growth higher up. I think I might take this one out. There's no right answer to any of this, of course. Then I'm going to take these back a bit. Looks a bit brutal, but we're doing it like this because we don't want to encourage them to become branches, because we don't want any branches at this height. We want the branches eventually to be much higher. So these are just really to produce lots of leaves so that the tree can photosynthesize well during the summer. So I'm going to have all these come back. And probably that one. This tree has grown a little at the top, and we've got a funny situation here because this is our leader, as it were, and this funny little thing is really not helping. So I'm actually going to take that as neatly as I can off. I'm also going to, these might become branches eventually, so I'm just going to take about 1/3 off, and the same thing on that one, and hope that they will carry on spreading out. And then I think I'm going to do the same on this one. That will encourage the top to grow up, and hopefully these will develop in the next year or so. So if you remember, we had 5 different types of mulching when we planted them. We discovered that the best combination of mulch was to have cardboard quite thickly laid underneath some wood chip. So we've recently put that down on all the trees, and you can see that here. The wood chip is fresher than I would have liked, and it also contains a lot of sort of fir tree type stuff, but we got it for free, so probably be absolutely fine. So this one here is Ashmead's Kernel. As you can see, it's very sturdy and has grown quite a lot, or nearly a foot I suppose at the top. It's one of the ones we noticed in the summer had very deep green, much healthier leaves, and they were all the same variety. Also, as you can see, the growth is very small and nothing much happening down here. I'm going to do the same on this tree as I did on the previous one and take off 2 or 3 of these lower ones, but I'm going to leave these 3 here because otherwise we won't have many leaves. The other interesting thing to note is how many flower buds we've got actually on the main stem. Now we don't really want them flowering, and I think later in the year, if we notice that they are flowering, we're just going to rub the flowers off because we want more leaves rather than flowers at this stage. It's got quite high, this one, and we want them to branch somewhere up here. So I'm actually going to take the top off this one to encourage side shoots to come off it, hopefully to produce our eventual branches. There we go. So now I'm going back down to the bottom to do these few smaller shoots. Would like to add that when we were doing the mulching, we took all the guards off and cleared out bits of grass that had grown inside the guards, and also any bits that had grown off the rootstock. Some of the trees had grown little bits off their rootstock, so we took those off and just tidied them all up. That's always worth doing at least once a year. Otherwise you can get lots of soil in there, grass, and then it starts to rot the trunk of the tree. This one is Kids Orange Red. It's had very little growth of any kind, but it's quite healthy. I'm just really concerned about this rather strange kind of joint that's appeared near the top, and not wanting this to become dominant in any way. I'm going to take that off and hope that the wound created will heal and that the leader will carry on up. So we'll see what happens. You've always got to kind of take a risk and see what it does in the year, and then have another go next year if it hasn't done what you want, sort of thing. We've got a different problem here. We have 3 almost equal shoots coming out at rather difficult angles. If the angle to the vertical is too small, the branches become quite weak because the join isn't a strong one. And we don't really want a tree with just 3 branches from about 4 foot off the ground. So it's a bit of a tricky one to know what to do with. I'm going to make a slightly brutal decision and choose this one as the strongest upright. So I'm going to take back these 2 quite firmly so that this one will grow on up. I'm also going to take the tip out of that one just to encourage some side growth, so that we get hopefully some branches coming out at better angles next year. So we've looked at some of the details, particularly at the tops of the trees, at what can happen and possibly what to do about it. I think the main points I'd like to get across at this stage are that we're aiming to get a very strong, sturdy main stem which will last the tree for the whole of its life, and that this method of pruning will hopefully foster that. So one thing to do during the early and later summer is to keep an eye on the growth on these middle range shoots, the ones that are not going to be real branches but are just carrying the leaves for the time being, to make sure that they don't get too vigorous and to try and take over. So you can just pinch back each one if you think they're getting a bit too long and strong, just keeping an eye on those. We'll probably come back in the summer and have a look and see how the growth is getting on, possibly doing a little bit of summer pruning on them if they need it, and just generally looking at the health of the trees, and also not forgetting in dry weather during the summer to give them a good water. That's always easy to forget when you're doing other things. So hopefully you will have got your young trees under control, and we'll see you again later.